Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you tonight. We thank you for being here to join together in this time of Bible study. We're studying in this Wednesday night class the works of the flesh. This is a little bit unusual because we usually cover more scriptural territory than we are in this study. We're spending a number of weeks studying just 3 verses of Scripture, Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through 21. We've been starting out each class by reading that section. Let's do it again. Galatians 5:19, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. All right, that's the text that we should know very well by now. And so the words that we want to study tonight, there are 3 in this lesson that we want to study. If you're looking at your study guide, we're going to be talking about strife, seditions, and heresies. Now, as we've explained each week, we're following the King James wording and order here. If you're reading a different English translation, it might be in a slightly different order. It might even use different words. For instance, the Amplified, which is more of a, it's not actually a translation. There's some commentary involved in the way that Amplified words things. The Amplified version says, selfishness, divisions or dissensions, party spirit, faction, sects with peculiar opinions, heresies. We'll see some of that as we look to the definitions. A better translation, New American Standard Version, speaks of disputes, dissensions, and factions. And the New International Version talks about selfish ambition, dissensions, and factions. So those are the words that we want to try to tackle, to understand. And then, of course, in practical application, make sure that we keep away from these works of the flesh. That's obviously what this is ultimately all about. So what about the first? We're going to hopefully, if time allows, we're going to cover all 3 of those words and look to how they're used in the Scripture. The first one is strife, and it comes from a Greek word which Strong says properly involves intrigue, by implication, faction, contentiousness, strife. And so I think the contentiousness is probably what we would emphasize from that definition. I thought it was interesting that he mentions there's an intrigue element involved in this. And as I was thinking about that, you can almost imagine how somebody would go around, maybe whisper under their breath, did you hear about this? Or let me tell you, or come over here and let me talk to you about this. Some sort of secretiveness. You know, you don't start out to cause a lot of trouble by being just bold and brash. You're usually trying to stay under the radar a little bit. And so I thought the fact that Strong suggested an intrigue element to this contentiousness might suggest that. You know, I'm not going to come in here and with a bullhorn and announce that I intend to cause trouble. I'm going to pull a couple people off to the side and talk in whispering voice, try to keep it low. That's the idea. Vine says it denotes ambition, self-seeking, rivalry, self-will being an underlying idea of the word. Hence it denotes party making, seeking to win followers. I thought all of that was good. There is an ambition element to this. Now, if you think about ambition is not necessarily in itself a bad thing, right? So so let's say you own a business, and you've hired 3 young men, and 2 of them are just really lazy. They don't want to do much. But one of them, you've described to someone, he's a really ambitious fella. I really appreciate him. In that sense, ambition wouldn't be a bad thing, but in this case, that ambition is to promote self. In this word, the ambition is to promote self, seeking to win followers, Vine says. So the idea of strife is, I've got this desire to get people to follow me. I want to sort of build my own party of people, of followers. And I very much want to promote myself. There's this selfish ambition. So keep that in mind. The next word is seditions. And Strong says about this word that it is disunion, dissension, division, sedition. So here I think the word we especially are going to be emphasizing is division or divisiveness. Vine says literally a standing apart, hence a dissension, a division. And so all of this is going to go to the fact that we're going to cause trouble, we're going to split people up. But if I'm promoting that, I'm not just trying to split people, I'm trying to split people up and draw some to myself. Now, that's the idea of strife and sedition. And then the third word that we want to take into consideration is the word heresies. Strong says heresy involves properly a choice, a party or a disunion, a sect to take for oneself, to prefer, to choose. And so concentrate on the idea of a party spirit, of disunion. So I want to get everybody on my side, or as many as I can at least. I want to develop my own sect, my own party. Vine says it denotes a choosing, a choice, then that which is chosen, and hence an opinion, especially a self-willed opinion, which is substitute for and leads to division and the formation of sects. A self-willed opinion that leads to division and the formation of sects or divided groups. Okay. I think this word heresy, and we've studied about it before, but this word heresy has really changed meaning over time. I think if you were to take a poll, a general poll of people, what is heresy? I think most people say, well, heresy is false teaching. That's when people depart from the truth and teach error. It's a heresy. They're teaching a religious error. That's not what the word originally meant. It may be what people think of today, but originally it was this party spirit. Someone with a lot of personal, self-willed ambition who doesn't mind causing trouble to divide people up and develop a party following. And so it's sort of a party spirit, I think, is the good way to think of heresies. So as we've been doing each week, let's take those definitions provided by authorities and come up with a working definition. So I'm going to say strife is personal ambition. And remember, ambition here is being used in a negative sense. It's not just that he's a hard worker, he's very enthusiastic, we really appreciate what he gets done. This is a guy who has personal ambition to promote himself. He's not afraid to cause trouble. Quarrelsome divisiveness is seditions. And then heresies is the building of a clique or a divisive group or party. Now, I don't know about you, but I can actually see how each of these leads to the next one. So if I've got this selfish personal ambition, then I'm not adverse to causing trouble. I'll quarrel with people. I don't care if it causes division, because as long as my ambitions are served, I don't really care. And I'll cause trouble if it comes to that. And what I really want to ultimately do is I want to develop those who will follow me in my party, be a part of my group, right? So I don't care to divide this whole group, just as long as I get some element to commit to me, to follow me personally, because that's my ambition to do so. So I think these words are all related in that way. Now, someone said, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about religion or are we talking about politics? You know, those descriptions sound like politics, don't they? That sounds like what politicians do. Well, yeah, that's true. But unfortunately, there are some politically minded people among Christians who would pursue that same sort of a course. Any thoughts or comments on any of this from anybody? All All right, so strife, seditions, and heresies. We're going to try to take all three of those. And what we will do, as we've been trying to do in each of these lessons, is we'll look to how the words are used in the New Testament. And in most of these studies, we're able to cover every place where the word is found. And I think we can at least come close to that tonight. So let's start out with strife. The first passage that we'll look at is Romans chapter 2, beginning verse 5. The righteous judgment of God, who will render to every man according to his deeds, to them who by patient continuance in well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, eternal life. But for them that are contentious and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation and wrath, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that doeth evil, of the Jew first and also of the Gentile. So this is talking about the righteous judgment of God. I think the first thing that we want to stress is this is the kind of thing that God's going to judge people about. And so God's going to judge righteously, and to those who do well, they will receive honor, glory and honor and immortality, eternal life. But to them that are contentious, they do not obey the truth, they obey unrighteousness. To them will come indignation and wrath, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that doeth evil. So I think it's significant that this contentiousness, and this is the word, by the way, it's the same Greek word that in our text of Galatians 5 is translated as strife. It is this word contentious. We gotta be extremely careful. God will judge those who are thus minded. I don't think that probably we really give enough consideration to that, you know. So if I'm just a contentious person and I just don't really care. I don't care about causing trouble. If it just doesn't. It's not even on my list of primary concerns. If what I do and how I act causes trouble, I'm not even worried about that. I better be worried about this contentiousness, this causing strife. It's a big deal, and we need to realize that it is so. I'm convinced that there's some Christians who don't care at all for that. It doesn't matter to them. If they cause strife, it's okay with them. It's not okay with God.
We had a young man here that they left because
Yeah, we actually had somebody leave here one time years ago who said, it's too peaceful at College View. Wow. That's one of the reasons I'd like to be here is because it's peaceful, but not for some folks. I'm going to get this right. Wade, not Wayne. Wayne's in teaching class, so I won't even see him. So I don't even have to think about that other name. Just Wade.
So the New American Standard, the 2020 edition, verse 8 says, but to those who are self-serving, do not obey.
Self-serving, that's that idea of selfish ambition. Yeah. And so I will cause trouble, and I don't care. I don't mind causing trouble if my purposes are served. That's what this is. Monty?
As we think about it, we're taught throughout the New Testament we're supposed to aspire and grow in our life toward being Christ-like. When Jesus came to this earth, it wasn't in his own best interest to do it. It wasn't serving his needs to do it. Living as a human instead of living in glory with God wasn't in his best benefit, especially being ridiculed, abused, being nearly to death, and crucified was not in his best interest. What would have been in his best interest would have been to call 12 ladies and angels to deliver him. So, but he done what needed to be done for the best interest of others. So if we're going to emulate him, his characteristics in our life, then we're not going to be contentious or self-serving or things like that. We're going to do what's best for everybody concerned, not just exclusive to our own benefit.
Okay, I think that's right. You know, I was thinking of a verse that we know very well. We recently studied the book of Jude. And Jude, verse 3 says, earnestly contend for the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints. So we're supposed to contend, but we're not supposed to be contentious. We're supposed to contend for the faith, whereas this contentiousness or strife causing, I'm not doing that on behalf of the truth. I'm doing that on behalf of my own selfish ambition. So there's a difference there. All right, moving on. This verse, we keep coming back to this verse because a lot of these works of the flesh are in this statement in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 20. Paul says, I fear lest when I come I shall not find you such as I would, and that I shall be found unto you as ye would not, lest there be debates, envyings, wrath, strifes, backbitings, whisperings, swellings, and tumult. So, Paul knew that this church at Corinth had a lot of trouble. In fact, the book we call 1 Corinthians, he enumerates a whole bunch of problems that existed in that church. Starts out in chapter 1 with the fact that they divided up into various sects or parts. I am of Paul, I am of Apollos, I am of Cephas, remember, in chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians. So they had actually divided into groups. There was that problem of the immoral man in chapter 5 that they would not discipline. In chapter 6, he talked about they were taking one another before civil authorities, basically suing one another in the civil courts. They were even arguing, beginning in chapter 11 through chapter 14 of 1 Corinthians, they were arguing about spiritual gifts. I'm better than you because all you can do is speak in tongues and I can prophesy. That's the kind of contentiousness that existed in Corinth. And Paul says, I'm afraid when I come, I'm going to find that sort of thing going on. And I will not be happy with you, and you won't be happy with me if I come there and find that this sort of thing is going on. So, here's the inspired apostle Paul says, I very much fear that I will find this strife, this contentiousness. Some local congregations are known for that sort of thing. There's always just fighting and bickering between the members in a local church. And again, I'm sad to say I think some Christians are satisfied for it to be that way, and it's not right, it's not good, and God will hold them accountable. It's a work of the flesh that is to be avoided. All right, Philippians 1, verse 15. Paul says, remember Paul's writing this from prison. We recently studied this book too. This is one of the prison epistles, and Paul's writing from Rome. He says, some indeed preach Christ even of envy and strife, and some also of goodwill. The one preach Christ of contention, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my bonds. So here's our word, and notice, Paul says the gospel is preached. Some are preaching it out of goodwill, but he says some are preaching it out of envy and strife. Why? Supposing to add affliction to my bonds. Now, these would be people who wanted to diminish the influence of the Apostle Paul. Why? To promote themselves, right? This selfish ambition. Why, if you were in that first century setting, why would you preach out of strife, intending to add affliction to Paul's bonds? He's already in prison. Well, because if I was one of those persons, and if I can diminish Paul, if I can get people to think less of Paul, then hopefully they'll think more of me. And that's that selfish ambition that would drive this troublemaking strife that we're talking about here, work of the flesh. All right? Philippians 2 verse 3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. Notice the contrast here. There's strife and vainglory contrasted with lowliness of mind, esteeming others better than self. So I think there's the contrast, right? The person who is willing to provoke strife is seeking vainglory instead of maintaining the lowliness of mind in which he esteems others better than himself. So you can't have it both ways. And notice, Paul says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory. I mean, this is all-encompassing. I had in my notes here a reminder about... So here's this local congregation, and in this local congregation there's this bad troublemaker. He causes strife, but you really get the idea that he is this self-ambitious individual. And the reason he's causing trouble is he likes to promote himself. And so the church splits then. So he'd been driving this thing for some time, and the church ultimately splits. And so he takes his little party of people off, and they start a new congregation somewhere. Well, then it's all suggested that this is a high and wonderful, very praiseworthy thing. They've started a new congregation. Well, the reason they started the new congregation was because of strife and vainglory. And so it's not a commendable thing, right? They were not supposed to do. Let nothing be done through. Well, we started a new congregation. No, that would be included. Don't even start a new congregation through strife and vainglory. It's not praiseworthy. So again, much to be avoided. Thoughts or comments here? Anybody? James 3, beginning verse 14. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not, and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there's confusion in every evil work. Here's our word in two places. If you have this strife in your heart, don't glory in that. In fact, you're actually lying against the truth. If you have strife in your heart, that's a bad thing. And he goes on to say, where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. And so this business, it's like a infectious sore. It spreads, and when it's allowed to exist, all kinds of confusion and lots of other bad things will result where there is envying and strife. All right, I think that covers the course of verses that talk about strife. But again, remember our definition is primarily selfish ambition. This guy's going to cause trouble, but he's got an underlying reason for it. Sometimes trouble has to be caused. If for instance, someone is teaching false doctrine, we're going to have to oppose that. And there may be trouble that results from the fact that we stand opposed to some false doctrine that's being taught or practiced. And so sometimes trouble is unavoidable. But this particular kind of trouble, this strife, is strife that is not righteous and is being pursued especially for the purpose of self-promotion. I want to get people looking up to me and following me. So that's what this is, all right? All right, so the next word. So we're talking about strife, seditions, and heresies. Let's look at the verses, and there's just a couple where we find this word sedition found. Romans 16:17. Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses, contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. So our word here is the word divisions. That is the same word as seditions. What are these people doing? They're causing divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine you have learned. So this is, I think, the next step, the next logical progression. I've got that selfish ambition in which I am willing to cause strife and contention. And I don't care. I will. It doesn't matter just as long as my purposes are served. So I cause strife, and doing that ultimately causes divisions, right? When I do that, you can expect that the result will be that there will be divisions. And notice that Paul says that we are to mark such individuals and avoid them. And so to mark them and ultimately then even to withdraw ourselves from them and avoid them would be necessary reactions to the person who's doing this sort of thing. I don't know. I can't remember, although my memory may be faded on this, but I can't remember through the years. I remember, unfortunately, times when the local congregation has had to withdraw from various individuals for various reasons. I can't really remember one who was withdrawn from for causing division. and that's probably neglectful on the part of the local churches, because there have been plenty of instances through the years where people caused division, probably should have been withdrawn from for doing so. But it is a horrible thing to cause division. Those who would do so should be marked or identified and ultimately withdrawn from. Wade?
I think most of the time those people end up leaving. So you never take discipline actions against them because they
A lot of times they leave, but what they sometimes do, and it will lead to this the third word, what they sometimes do is pull a group off with them when they leave, and some people follow them, and that's always a sad scenario. All right, the other place, and so we find this word seditions in Galatians 5, our text, but we only find it, as best I could find, in its exact usage in these two other verses. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 3, for ye are yet carnal, for whereas there is among you envying and strife and divisions, are ye not carnal and walk as men? Here's our word. This word strife is a slightly different form than the word that we looked at just a minute ago. But here's our word. This is the same word as seditions. So as we said, when Paul wrote to the church at Corinth here in 1 Corinthians, it was a church there was just all kinds of trouble in Corinth. And remember, the book starts out in chapter 1. I've heard that there are divisions among you. And, I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Cephas, I'm of Christ. They were actually lining up in parties following certain men. Some of them were even claiming to follow Paul, and Paul wanted no part of that. But notice he says, when you do that, it's an evidence that ye are yet carnal. You're walking as men. When people will pursue their selfish ambitions to the point of dividing churches, then that's just a sign that they are not spiritually minded individuals. They're carnal. They're this worldly minded, and they're walking as men, not as spiritually led people. Those who are mature spiritually hate division and dissension and strife. Now again, sometimes it's unavoidable. It's not a good thing to say, well, I'm for peace at all costs. No, we can't be at peace. We can't be for peace at all costs. Sometimes there must be trouble, and we're going to see that as we get to this last word. But we should take no satisfaction in it. There should be no joy in us to know that there's trouble and division. It's a bad thing. And those who would go about to cause it without regret, they cause the trouble and it leads to division, and they are not sorry for it in any way whatsoever. That's a sign that they're carnal, they're worldly minded, and they are not. They're walking as men rather than as the spiritual servants of God. Thoughts or comments, anybody? All right, so that's sedition. So strife and seditions. Remember our progression. Strife is personal selfish ambition. Sedition, quarrelsome divisiveness. So I've got these selfish ambitions, and I will quarrel and cause divisions with any time that it serves my purposes. And then finally it leads to heresy. And heresy, as we said, is the building of a clique to draw off a divided group or a sect or a party of my own. That's what this ultimately leads to. Look how this word heresy is used in a couple places here in Acts. Acts 5:17. This is when they had called the apostles, remember, before them. Actually, this was the second time they called the apostles. The high priest rose up, and all they that were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and were filled with indignation. Only reason we're using this verse is because we pick up that word sect there, which is a divided off group. The Jews, we know, had their various divided groups. Principally, we know, there were some others, but principally in the New Testament, first century era, there were the Sadducees and the Pharisees. But they were two distinctly divided parties among the Jews. And a divided party like that is called a sect. Now, that's the way it was among the Jews. But it can be that way among Christians as well. We can divide off into distinct party groups. The word is used. Here's another place, chapter 15, verse 5. There rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees, which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them, to command them to keep the law of Moses. We've talked quite a bit recently about Acts chapter 15 and that meeting that took place at Jerusalem, where the Judaizing teachers were trying to force Gentile converts to be circumcised. And the ones who were driving that, the ones who were really causing that trouble, was the sect of the Pharisees. Now these were converted Jews, but they were of that Jewish party known as the Pharisees, and they were still following that party spirit attitude. And again, they were certainly causing strife and division over this business of circumcision for the Gentile converts, right? But they all in their entire heritage, they hadn't had any reservations about dividing up into sects or parties. Chapter 24 of Acts, verse 5. When Paul was before Felix, remember Paul had been arrested in Jerusalem, been transported to Caesarea, and the Jews came up to Caesarea to level their accusations against Paul before the governor Felix. And those Jews said, "We have found this man," they're talking about is Paul. "We have found this man a pestilent fellow and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." And so they were referring to the sect or the party of the Nazarenes. Well, that was their description. It's not an accurate description. Paul wasn't trying to develop his own heretical party. In fact, we know he opposed that. So this is a false charge. This is a false accusation. But that's what they used, that word, a divided off faction. That's what they charged Paul with doing, which is not a false accusation. But we're just using that to see where and how the word is used. In chapter 24, verse 14, later in that same chapter, Paul says, in that same hearing before Felix, Paul says, "But this I confess unto thee, that after the way they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets." So he said, notice his accusers, they call it heresy. He says, but he says, I'm worshiping God, believing everything that was written in the law and the prophets would come to pass. And so he understands they're calling him a heretic. He understands that's what they're calling him, but we understand, of course, that he was not. Wade?
I don't know what to think about what you said about it. I see that sometimes in politics, because a party or a person may be part of a party for a very long time, but the ideas of the party will change, but the person is dedicated to the party, not to his own ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening in this situation, where they're more worried about what the party thinks or the sect thinks than they do about what God thinks.
I think you're exactly right. I think and as I said earlier, there's a striking similarity between this progression and what politicians do. Very similar. And unfortunately, when it comes to religion, we see politics too often. Exactly right. All right. Again in Acts chapter 26, verse 5, Paul's speaking, still trying to defend himself against his accusers. He says, "My manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among my own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews. All the Jews know of my manner of life from youth, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most strictest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee." So there Paul says, I was a member of that party. Obviously, he's not a member of that party anymore. He's left that to serve Christ. And so, just like Wade was saying a minute ago, what was more important to Paul? The religious party that he had grown up in, which was the Pharisees, or learning and obeying the truth? Obviously, in the case for Paul, it was to know and obey the truth. But he said, I had been in that party. Pharisees. All right, chapter 28 in Acts. Paul has made it to Rome. You know, we know all about the shipwreck. He has finally gotten to Rome. And when he gets to Rome, he calls for the chief rulers of the Jews in the city of Rome. And so he says in Acts 28, verse 20, "For this cause, therefore, have I called for you, to see you, to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel I am bound with this chain." And they said unto them, "We neither received letters out of Judea concerning thee, neither any of the brethren that came showed or spake any harm of thee, but we desire to hear of thee what thou thinkest. For as concerning this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against." So here's our word right here again, this divided off party. But this is, again, that's not good terminology. We would not want to say, well, we are of the sect of, and then we identify ourselves. Now, we want to just be faithful New Testament Christians, right? And so Paul wasn't the one who said that I'm a member of a sect. It's these Jews in Rome who had heard about something that they called a sect. And they said, we know that everywhere it's spoken against. So the only thing that they had heard in Rome is these Christians are a bad lot. We're hearing bad things about these Christians everywhere. They are the ones who use the word sect. But again, you get the sense of what that means. Heresy or a sect is a pulling off into a party of their own. And that's what they accuse the Christians of being. Again, it's a false accusation, but notice how they use the word. All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 19. "For there must be also heresies among you, that they which are approved may be made manifest among you." Here's our word, heresies. This divided off party, this party spirit, this splitting up. And I ask you in the questions, do heresies provide any useful purpose? You know, to commit heresy, to develop, to pull off a party of your own, to have your own sect or faction, that's a bad thing. But Paul says there's going to be heresies, but at least the result of that is that they which are approved may be made manifest. In other words, when this happens, when selfish people cause trouble leading to division and heresy or party development, they expose themselves for the sinners that they are. And what happens is that those who are approved, that is, those who are maintaining faithfulness and righteousness, are shown in such troubled times. You know, nobody likes trouble. Hopefully, we hate trouble, but trouble happens. Trouble in churches happens. We don't like it, we don't want it, but it happens. But when it happens, at least the result of that is that those who are perceptive will be able to realize who's standing for the truth and who's just promoting their own cause, right? And so I believe that that's the notion here in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 19. There must also be heresies among you, that they which are approved may be made manifest among you. In other words, that should, for those who are spiritually perceptive, it should be easy enough to detect that if we allow it to be so. All right? All right. We got finally one last verse. 2 Peter 2, beginning verse 1. But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. Well, here's our word, heresies. Now, this is neat. We've looked at this verse plenty of times in the past. How do these false teachers do their work? Privily. They privily bring in damnable heresies. And so again, the idea is not that they're just going to come in and openly and loudly announce their plans and intentions. They're going to try to stay under the radar. They're going to keep it quiet. So they're going to privily bring in damnable heresies. How bad could it be? Some of them would even deny the Lord that bought them and bring on themselves swift destruction. But notice, many shall follow their pernicious ways. But that's what this heresy is, right? This heresy is an effort to pull off a group, to follow me. I want to develop my own party here. I want people loyal to me. And so I'm going to get people to follow me. And of course, what happens is the way of truth is evil spoken of when that kind of stuff happens. Wade?
I was going to say, that word is translated secretly.
Yeah, the word privily, that's an old English word. That'd be like privately or secretly. Again, they're not going to openly announce their intentions. They're going to try to keep it quiet, keep it low. That's how they do their work. But I think this is a good verse to end on because it really sort of exposes the progression, right? They're going to come in privily. They've got their ambitions, their self-promotion. They're going to cause trouble, and it'll lead to divided off factions or sects. They're going to cause heresy. And notice, many will follow this. You'd like to think that Christians would say, "Oh, man, that guy is obviously off. I have no interest in what he's promoting." Sadly, that's not always the case. And Peter says many will be led away by such individuals. And then, of course, the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. All of that kind of stuff. When there's trouble in churches, it just gives occasion for the enemies of the Lord to sort of rejoice in the fact that his own people can't get along and act right. Any final thoughts or comments? Monty.
It says many of them, I think about it, I see that's how the denominations started. There was the truth being taught, and then somebody brought in a heresy and made a following and separate off into this denomination or that one. Like you said, we've got thousands of them nowadays. But that's how it all started. Somebody wanted a following, they wanted a little bit of power and glory, and so they changed the truth a little bit in a way that was appealing to people. Maybe gave them an easier lifestyle, or gave them a way to do something that they really wanted to do to begin with, but was forbidden by the gospel. So, "Oh no, you can do that. Come on, follow me. We'll start our own."
Yeah.
So that's really how we can see historically how that's worked.
I think you're right. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.